The story begins as a man named Frank Liga is driving through the city. He stops at a traffic signal when another man named Kevin Gaines pulls up beside him in a car. Frank stares at him for a moment, which immediately irritates him. Kevin becomes aggressive and starts verbally confronting Frank right there on the road. After the signal changes, Frank tries to drive away and avoid any trouble, but Kevin begins chasing him through the streets in a fit of rage. The situation quickly escalates as Kevin keeps threatening and provoking him. Eventually, Frank pulls out his gun and shoots Kevin in self-defense. Soon after, the police arrive at the scene. Frank reveals that he is an undercover police officer.
I'm a fucking cop! Shit, this guy's got a... We got you, man. 100 man down.
We checked his pockets. This guy's a cop.
A large number of detectives and officers soon surround the area and begin investigating the incident. During the investigation, they discover that the man who was killed was also a police officer named Kevin Gaines. After this, Detective Russell Poole arrives at the scene. His superior tells him to quickly wrap up the case and close it as soon as possible.
Our shooter is undercover detective Frank Liga. The T's and dot the I's.
However, Russell is clearly not satisfied with this approach and does not seem happy about how things are being handled. Then the story jumps 18 years ahead to 2015. Russell is now retired and living a lonely life. One day, he watches an old recording related to the murder case from 18 years ago. In reality, 18 years earlier, a famous rapper named Christopher Wallace, also known as the Notorious B.I.G., had been murdered, and Russell had been assigned to solve that case. Shortly after this, a journalist named Darius comes to Russell's house. He wants to interview him about the case.
Can I help you?
Door's open. I knocked.
I'm a journalist.
Russell, however, is not interested in talking at all. Darius already knows about his past investigation, but Russell still avoids the discussion. Darius insists and asks him what really happened to Wallace 18 years ago. In response, Russell says something cryptic. He asks, if a white man shoots a black man, whose fault it is. Hearing this, Darius becomes confused and cannot properly respond.
White guy shoots and kills a black guy. Who's at fault?
Frustrated, Russell throws him out of the house. Darius leaves in a bad mood and goes out to drink, trying to process everything Russell just said. Then he heads back to his boss, who notices that he looks disturbed. The boss asks him why he is so upset. Darius explains that he met Russell Poole today. He says he wanted to interview him about the Christopher Wallace murder case, but Russell was speaking in riddles and nothing made sense to him. The boss responds that Russell used to be an excellent detective. However, the Christopher Wallace murder case destroyed his life, his reputation, and even his career. He adds that Russell has spent the last 18 years unable to solve the case, so it is better not to get involved with him anymore, because now he is just a broken, unstable man. But Darius is not willing to give up so easily. He goes back to Russell's house once again. This time he tells Russell that he knows something important. He says that 18 years ago, Russell had almost solved the Christopher Wallace murder case, but his own colleagues betrayed him. According to Darius, the police department labeled all of Russell's findings and evidence as fake and unreliable. Hearing this, Russell starts getting flashbacks. In those memories, we see Wallace returning home after a party, but on the way, he is shot and killed. Back in the present, Russell finally agrees to talk more seriously. Darius then asks him when he first got assigned on the case of Wallace's murder. Russell replies that he was assigned to the murder case about 1 month later, as he was working on another case involving a white police officer shooting a black man. Then the story shifts again into Russell's 18-year-old flashback, where we see Officer Kevin and Frank connected to the case. Russell goes to the shooting site, where his superior tells him to quickly wrap up the case no matter what. He casually says that it was just a black cop who was killed, so no one will really care about it anyway. Hearing this, Russell gets extremely angry. He realizes that his entire department is filled with racist cops and biased attitudes. Despite this, he continues his investigation and starts developing doubts about the case, especially about Frank. He goes to meet Officer Frank directly. Frank claims that he had been working undercover for 3 years. He says that because of that, his cover was blown. Regarding the shooting, Frank insists he was simply trying to leave peacefully, but Officer Kevin followed him as if he wanted to kill him. Frank says he was forced to shoot Kevin in self-defense.
I'm dropping 3 years undercover. He chased me, man. Up, and I shot in fucking defense.
However, Russell's deeper investigation begins to reveal contradictions. He finds out that Officer Kevin actually worked for Death Row Records in some capacity and had ties to criminal activities. Death Row Records was a major music label and rival to Wallace's label, making the situation even more suspicious. Interestingly, Kevin's death happened just 9 days after Wallace's murder. Further investigation shows that the CEO of Death Row Records, Suge Knight, is connected to a gang network and is known for criminal activity. Death Row itself appears to function not just as a music company, but also as a cover for illegal business, where violence and crime are common. Then the story shifts to March 1997. Members of Death Row Records are shown having a party and enjoying themselves. Suddenly, a woman arrives and starts shouting outside. She claims that she knows Death Row and specifically Suge Knight were responsible for her husband Officer Kevin's death. One of the gang members grabs her aggressively and tells her to leave if she wants to stay alive, but she refuses to back down.
Where are you at? I know you did it! Go take care of these kids, you gonna pay my bills? They killed my husband.
Russell arrives at the scene and tries to intervene, attempting to calm the situation. Seeing Russell, the gang members threaten him as well. The woman warns Russell that if they could have her husband killed, they could easily do the same to him too. This confuses Russell because according to Frank's statement, Officer Kevin was killed by Frank in self-defense. The woman then reveals a critical detail. Her husband was working part-time security for Suge Knight, and he likely saw something he was not supposed to see. Because of that, Kevin may have been killed, and she is convinced Suge Knight was involved. Russell then questions his superior, asking why the Kevin murder case is even being interfered with by other officers without his permission. His boss responds that the matter has already been closed. He is told that Officer Kevin worked for Death Row Records, which means he was involved in criminal activities. His superior argues that Kevin was a criminal, so his death should not matter much, and the department's priority is only to avoid bad publicity. So they have decided to close the case quietly. Russell is clearly unhappy with this decision and feels frustrated with how corrupt and biased the system is. Later, Russell is approached by an undercover agent named Terrence. Interestingly, this is the same man who was seen earlier threatening Kevin's wife. Terrence introduces himself properly and explains that he has been working undercover in the Death Row Records. He tells Russell that during his work, he heard disturbing rumors that several police officers were working for Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and that Kevin was one of them. He also shares a more shocking rumor. According to him, it is possible that Wallace was not actually killed directly by Death Row, but that Officer Kevin's death was somehow necessary in the larger chain of events connected to the case. He tells Russell to connect the dots between Wallace's murder and Kevin's murder himself.
I'm Special Agent Terrence Watts. FBI infiltrated Death Row. This is something that I would not risk my cover for.
A few days later, Internal Affairs holds a hearing for Officer Frank. Russell is unable to prove that Frank was secretly working for Death Row Records. As a result, Frank is cleared of all allegations and the case is closed. After this, Russell is transferred to the Robbery Homicide Division, where he is assigned to investigate the murder of Wallace. He attends a briefing led by Detective Fred Miller, where they are told the basic details of the case. A black sedan was involved and the victim was shot. Russell, however, does not share his deeper suspicions with his new partner at first. He suspects there is a connection between Officer Kevin, Death Row Records, and the murder of Biggie, but he chooses to stay silent because he no longer trusts anyone. Over time, Russell and Fred Miller slowly develop a working relationship and begin to trust each other. Eventually, Russell opens up to Fred and tells him that Wallace was one of the most famous rappers in the world, and his murder was not something simple. He says he has heard rumors that Suge Knight may have been involved, and that several police officers could also be part of the conspiracy, including Officer Kevin. He also believes Kevin may have been killed to silence him before he could expose the truth.
Wallace exits the Peterson in the first vehicle. Is an off-duty Inglewood police officer. Biggie's security, Eugene D. North on Fairfax, pulling parallel. Other cops advised they would know to avoid.
Back in the present, Darius is shocked after hearing all of this. He asks Russell what Fred Miller's reaction was to such a dangerous theory. Russell replies that Fred was mostly focused on his pension and staying out of trouble. He further says that Fred Miller eventually left him without hesitation because he could clearly see that Russell's theory was correct. However, Fred also understood that they could not stand against the dirty cops because they were in the majority. Russell continues explaining that soon the police tried to discredit his theory by bringing in a suspect named D. Mac. The story shifts to November 1997. Police intelligence leads to the arrest of D. Mac. During the investigation, it is revealed that he is also a police officer working for Death Row Records. During interrogation, an FBI agent tells him that a 9mm bullet was recovered from his home, and also a black sedan, which was linked to the Christopher Wallace murder case. Strangely, instead of taking it seriously, D. Mac laughs it off. Soon after, the police shut down the case against D. Mac as well. At this point, Russell finally realizes the full truth. He understands that the entire department is corrupt. Back in the present, Russell tells Darius that Wallace's family had filed a case against the police department. If it was proven that police officers were involved in the murder of Christopher Wallace, it would create a massive scandal. Since Biggie was a top rapper with enormous earning potential and global influence, a conviction involving police corruption would not only destroy reputations, but could also financially damage powerful institutions. Because of this, the entire case was being suppressed, and even related news was being destroyed. Russell then tells Darius to retrieve the case files through police channels. Darius manages to access them and notices something disturbing. The files contain multiple murder records linked to death row records, but large portions of the documents are redacted or blacked out. Russell explains that off-duty officers were working security for death row. Whenever a murder incident involved such officers, their names were deliberately removed from records to protect the department's image. Realizing this, Darius confronts the police superiors and asks why police involvement in death row-related incidents was being erased from the files. They respond by saying Darius is starting to sound just like Russell. They call Russell a liar and claim he damaged the reputation of the police department. They also say that the earlier lawsuit filed by Wallace's family was based on Russell's dirty cop theory. Darius becomes extremely angry after hearing this.
I've seen the Wallace murder book. I cannot comment on an open investigation.
The only civil case was based upon his theory, and I don't want to talk about it anymore, and we're about to have...
Later, while going home, Darius is suddenly arrested by a police officer without any clear reason. He quickly realizes that this is not random, but likely connected to Russell's investigation. The next day, newspapers report developments related to the case being influenced or controlled. Darius also learns that his boss has removed him from the Christopher Wallace investigation entirely. He is also warned that if he continues trying to expose police corruption or defame the department, the consequences will be far worse. Darius starts feeling lost and unsure about what to do next. He decides to meet Russell's old partner, Fred Miller. During their conversation, Darius learns that Fred was forcibly removed from the Christopher Wallace investigation team and was pushed into retirement. Darius asks Fred about what really happened back then. Fred reveals that the department was involved in a very dirty game connected to the murder case. He says there was one particular person who kept coming to meet DMAC even during the investigation, someone who was actually on the suspect list. However, that person was never arrested or properly interrogated. Hearing this, Darius becomes even more confused. He goes back to Russell and asks him to continue the story in detail. Russell then explains everything from his side. He says that when he realized police officers were involved in the Christopher Wallace murder case, he tried to report it to his superior, but he was shut down immediately. Then he contacted the LAPD, but they also ignored him. After that, he filed a formal complaint against the LAPD with the district attorney's office. This made the department angry, and from that point onward, he was bullied, isolated, and completely pushed out. They tried to portray him as someone who damaged the reputation of the police force. Russell then reveals another shocking detail. He says there was another corrupt officer involved in death row-related activities named Raphael. This officer used to steal drugs and was deeply involved in criminal work. One day, Russell followed Raphael and witnessed something disturbing. Raphael shot a man and then planted evidence by firing bullets into the victim's car, trying to frame it as if the shooting was part of some kind of random incident. Seeing this, Russell confronted Raphael at gunpoint. However, Raphael took advantage of a moment and broke Russell's ankle, trying to escape the situation. Later, Raphael was interrogated and brought to trial. During questioning, he admitted that he was a corrupt cop and confessed that there were many other corrupt officers in the department working for a gang. This gang had deep connections within the system and was involved in organized crime. However, instead of naming Death Row Records, he makes up another name of the gang called the Mob. This whole cover-up was essentially a distraction created by the LAPD itself. It was designed to hide their connections with Death Row Records and the Christopher Wallace case. Russell explains that all the statements made by Raphael and others were proven in court, which ultimately helped the department claim that there was no link between the LAPD and Death Row Records. In other words, all of Russell's investigation, effort, and theories were destroyed based on one manipulated testimony. Despite this setback, Russell refuses to give up. He says he still has one key lead left: Frank, the officer who killed Kevin. Russell takes Frank to the district attorney and presents evidence that Kevin was actually connected to Death Row Records. He argues that the shooting was not a random road rage incident, but a collision between a clean cop and a corrupt system. From this connection, a bigger picture starts to emerge. Russell argues that the department is trying to ruin Frank's reputation to protect the secret that their own officers were involved in the murder of the notorious B.I.G. Based on this argument, the district attorney agrees to reopen the case and allows Russell to present everything in court again. Russell and his team are now close to proving in court that police officers were directly involved in the entire conspiracy surrounding the case. However, he never actually gets the chance to prove that. At the last moment, the police commissioner and the district attorney block them from even appearing in court by agreeing for a settlement in their absence. With that, Russell completely loses his remaining faith in the justice system and law enforcement. In the present timeline, Russell and Darius meet Wallace's mother. Darius learns that she had previously filed a case, but the FBI was involved and the entire investigation was buried and made to disappear, turning it into an unsolved mystery. Russell then reveals that just 2 weeks before he was about to retire, he resigned instead. He says he could not solve the case, and he also refused to become part of the corruption he was being pushed into. But he did not realize that this decision would destroy his personal life, and his family eventually left him because of the toll it took on them. Later, while going through old LAPD files with Darius, Russell discovers some newer investigation records that were created after he had already left the department. During this, he comes across the name Wardell Faust, a known hitman connected to Suji Knight. The files suggest that Faust was the probable killer behind Wallace's murder, and that several important details related to him had been buried for years. After finding this new lead, Russell becomes convinced that he finally has enough evidence to expose the truth. Determined to fight one last time, he gathers all the documents and heads to the sheriff's department, hoping to get the case reopened and finally prove that the murder was part of a much larger cover-up. However, even after presenting the new evidence, Russell's claims are dismissed once again by the authorities. The people in charge refuse to reopen the investigation, treating his theory like nothing more than another conspiracy. The frustration and emotional burden become too much for him to handle, and he suffers a massive heart attack and dies on the spot. When Darius learns about Russell's death, he is deeply shaken and emotional. He goes back to work and publishes Russell's entire story in a newspaper, exposing the truth. His boss is not happy about this, but Darius stands by his decision and resigns from his job because he does not want to work for a system that he believes is completely corrupt. In the end, it is shown that Christopher Wallace's case still remains unsolved, and around 50% of African American homicide cases also remain unresolved. And with that, the movie comes to an end.